I'm sorry that I only have a few minutes for you today, Lord Timon, but I do think it was important for us to meet so that I could give you some important news. If you want it, here it is. I've been looking over your financial statements, and they're very disturbing. For example, item 1, you agreed to pay for your servant Lucilius's dower so that he could get married. Noble, but extravagant. Item 2, you paid your friend Ventidius's debt so you can get him out of prison. Again, that was very selfless of you. Item 3, you gave away horses. Item 4, you bought that gaudy, expensive bauble from the jeweler and then you gave it away. Timon, I'm asking you to make your mind up fast. If you want my financial advice, I can give it to you anytime. However, I'm prefacing that by saying, if you're serious, I can give it, but you better hurry because your savings may not last even one more day. Did I hear you say that you believe that as long as you keep giving away money, you'll always have friends? Did it ever occur to you that there must be a catch? Ask your loyal and trusted servant Flavius just how much money you actually have left. I think you'll be very surprised. Let me know tomorrow what you want to do. Do you know that the people who benefited from your generosity are telling every sycophant and parasite, will you walk away from a fool and his money? Look, Sonny, I'm all for being generous and helping people who really need it, but that's a far cry from opening up your doors and screaming at the top of your lungs, if you want it, here it is, come and get it. But if you think you're going to be able to keep doing this forever when your coffers are already empty, you're crazy. So trust me, you better hurry because it's going fast. I've got to go. I'll see you tomorrow. I'm starting a new business. I'm also thinking about growing a mustache. Thank you. I'm pretty pleased with my progress as well. Timon, I got your note. You say that you want to have a banquet for a lot of your so-called friends, but you don't have any money left. Well, that's a problem. You say that you're going to only be serving them hot water in pots? Well, that's not really a meal. I have some fine soups here if you're interested. I've got mulligatawny.
No.
How about crab bisque?
No.
Well, what about jambalaya? We could serve them in fine bowls and give them some crackers to crumble. I mean, crackers in a bowl, that could be a meal.
No, you don't understand. It's not really a meal. I'm just putting on a show.
Well, what's the show about?
It's about nothing. These people have been sponging off me long enough, so now they're getting nothing.
So you're saying it's a show about nothing. I think you might have something here. But how about I get some soup for you?
Does it come with bread?
Bread, $2 extra.
What?
You're pushing your luck, little man.
Is that lima bean?
Yes.
I've never been a big fan.
Very good. Very good. So this is your order. You only want hot water in pots, no crackers, no bowls, and you know something? No soup for you. In recent years, the United States has been exceedingly generous to foreign nations. Excuse me a moment. In recent years, the United States has been exceedingly generous to foreign nations by providing financial aid to countries that desperately needed it and to other countries that could probably do just as well without it. Yet without fail, any time the U.S. discontinues financial aid to any of these countries, or worse, requires military assistance or financial aid from these countries that have formerly benefited from the United States, the USA is ridiculed and scorned. This was also the case with the generous title character of William Shakespeare's play Timon of Athens. So let's take a look at the plot. The play opens in the house of a wealthy Athenian nobleman named Timon. It's filled with numerous merchants, including a poet, a painter, and a jeweler who talk amongst each other about possibly selling their works to Timon. Timon finds out that his dear friend Ventidius is in prison, and Timon sends him money to pay his bail. He also buys merchandise from the visiting workmen. Timon's friend, Apomatus, visits his house. He's a cynical and gruff man who constantly ridicules Timon for his cheerful greetings and scorns Timon's guests, who are, according to Apomatus, just sycophants who only want his money, but Timon ignores Apomatus' cynicism. His other friend, Captain Alcibiades, is a noble warrior who also comes to his house to enjoy the large feast that Timon is throwing in his reception hall. However, Apomatus is only interested in watching the flatterers. Timon tells his guests how he's thankful for his friends, but his loyal and trusted servant Flavius is deeply concerned that Timon will soon run out of money because of his extreme generosity. Although rumors abound that Timon has some secret source of income, because it seems like he'll never run out of gifts to impart on others, one day 3 creditors appear at Timon's front door. He tries to send them away, but they insist on being paid. Flavius tells Timon that he warned him about his dwindling funds several times before, but Timon always ignored his notices. Timon then tries to sell his land, but finds out that it's already been mortgaged. He asks his friends for loans, but none of them will lift a finger to help him in his time of need. He asks Ventidius, who Timon recently freed from jail, but even he refuses to help. His creditor's servants start camping out at Timon's house, awaiting payment, and consider among themselves how odd it is that their masters demand money of Timon, even though they continue to wear and use the gifts he's already given them. Despite, however, his financial hardship, Timon plans to host one last dinner party. He invites all of his so-called friends and other noblemen. During the feast, Timon publicly prays that God never gives people all that they desire, for one day they will abandon him. He has his remaining servants bring out all that he has to offer, bowls of tepid water and rocks. He then curses his false friends, throws them out of his house, and leaves Athens to become a misanthrope. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Alcibiades is trying to get the senators to lessen the sentence of one of his junior officers who killed a man in a crime of passion, but they dismiss him. Alcibiades is so irate that he lashes out at the Senate and they banish him. But as they exit, Alcibiades vows to seek revenge on Athens with the support of his troops. Timon's servants mourn his loss, saying it's a tragedy that such a generous man could be so miserably treated and grow so cynical in his outlook. Flavius, his steward, uses the last of his own money to recompense the other servants and goes off in search of his old master. One day, while Timon is scrounging for food in a hovel, he happens upon a massive amount of gold. Now, mistrustful of money, Timon only keeps a little of the gold and buries the rest. He meets Alcibiades in the wilderness. Alcibiades tells him that he plans to raise an army and conquer Athens. Happy at this news, Timon gives him some more of his gold and encourages the slaughter of his former homeland. While Timon is living in a cave, Apomatus comes to see him. Apomatus rebukes him for being so generous to everyone, even people who were obviously using him. The two trade insults. Timon doesn't understand why Apomatus hates the world so much when he hasn't been as badly treated by it as Timon has. When Apomatus departs, the only thing the two of them agree on is that humanity should be destroyed. Flavius visits Timon in his cave and offers his services, but Timon, seeing that he doesn't hate humanity yet, gives him gold and commands him to leave him alone. When the poet and the painter learn that Timon has acquired gold again, they pay him a visit in his cave. Timon has a bit of fun with them and exacts some revenge by sending them on a twisting journey before he gives them any money. After learning of his self-imposed exile, 2 senators of Athens, led by Flavius, arrive to tell Timon that Athens regrets how they treated him and entreat him to return because they're terrified of Alcibiades destroying the city. However, despite their pleas, Timon tells them that he will not return, but sarcastically offers them the freedom to hang themselves on his tree as a means of avoiding Alcibiades' wrath. As Alcibiades begins his invasion, the trembling senators plead with him not to destroy everyone in Athens. Hearing their defense, Alcibiades agrees to enter the city in peace and says that he will only punish those who've personally offended him or who explicitly abused Timon's generosity. At that moment, a messenger enters saying that Timon has died. As he mourns, Alcibiades reads the following epitaph that Timon wrote for himself. Here lies a wretched corpse, of wretched soul bereft. Seek not my name, a plague consume you wicked caitiffs left. Here lie I, Timon, who, alive, all living men did hate. Pass by and curse thy fill, and stay not here thy gate. Alcibiades concludes the play by saying what a terrible tragedy it was that Timon died thinking he could trust no one on earth. When we return, we'll look at some of the remarkable characters in Timon of Athens. I've read several criticisms of Timon of Athens which mention that the play seems almost unfinished. I believe that part of the reason for the criticism is that a number of the characters are not even given names. For example, among Timon's parasitic friends are characters known as a poet, a painter, a jeweler, and a merchant. They all tend to be two-dimensional characters, or rather versions of the same character, being grateful to Timon for lavishing money and gifts upon them in his time of affluence, and disparaging him for giving away all he had to them, saying that he should have known better. Even the senators who took gifts from Timon are not given names. Ironically, although they only appear in one scene in the entire play, Phrynia and Timandra, the 2 whores, are given names. And besides these prostitutes, the only other female characters in the entire play are unnamed Amazonian dancers. Timon himself begins the play as a wealthy lord and former military man who lavishes wealth on anyone in need, as well as anybody to whom he considers his friend. Unfortunately, Timon's wealth runs out, and when that happens, he quickly learns that his servants are loyal, but virtually all the people who benefited from his generosity are not. The one exception is Captain Alcibiades, who, like Timon himself, is a military man. He offers to give Timon gold in his time of need, but Timon refuses it and instead gives Alcibiades gold to seek vengeance on Athens. Apomantus is a churlish philosopher who, unlike Timon's other guests, refuses to take any money from Timon. He continuously chides Timon for being a foolish giver, but unlike Polonius in Hamlet, who gives his son Laertes good counsel about money, Apomantus never does it in a kind or loving way, but instead considers Timon to be a bigger fool than the sycophants on who he's constantly giving away all he owns. And finally, there's Flavius, Timon's loyal and trusted steward, who tries to give him good advice, even though Timon ignores him until it's too late. Flavius demonstrates his kindness by sharing what little he has left with the other servants, and then offers to stay with Timon even in his poverty. Wouldn't it be nice to find good help like this today? When we return, we'll look at some of the plot devices and memorable scenes from Timon of Athens. One of the most interesting plot devices in Timon of Athens is the use of irony. At first, we see how ironic it is that when Timon is thought to be wealthy, all of the parasites gladly take his money. Yet when he sends out to them through his servants requesting financial assistance from his former beneficiaries, they come up with the most creative excuses for not returning the favor. Ironically, when he's reduced to living in the wilderness and digging for roots, Timon uncovers gold long after the time when it would have done him the most good. It's also ironic that he calls the poet and the painter honest men 8 times in 30 lines, even though he knows them to be phony hypocrites. Shakespeare also uses banquets as plot devices. In Timon of Athens, there are 2 banquet scenes. At the first one, we get to meet all of his false friends and hangers-on, and at the second one, Timon wreaks revenge on his unworthy guests. And once again, Shakespeare uses banishment to drive the good and noble Captain Alcibiades out of Athens, who unsuccessfully beseeched the Senate to show leniency when sentencing one of his junior officers. Is it any wonder why this military leader comes back in anger to seek revenge on his former country? As far as memorable scenes go, let's take a look at 3, but keep in mind that this play was discovered without any acts. They were put in later on by secondary contributors, and so may not be 100% as the author intended. First we have Act 3, Scenes 1, 2, and 3, wherein Timon's servants visit beneficiaries of their master's generosity who come up with all different kinds of excuses why they cannot or should not give Timon any money in his time of need. These are very funny scenes. Next, there's the second banquet scene in Act 3, Scene 7, when Timon invites his false friends back for what they assume will be another bountiful feast, but turns out to be nothing more than covered pots full of water and rocks, and Timon takes this opportunity to scorn them all and turn them out for the hypocrites that they are. The scene ends with Timon going mad with rage and vowing to turn his back on mankind and seek out his existence in the wild. And finally, in Act 4, Scene 3, we find Timon, now a hater of mankind, living naked in a hovel and digging for roots when he ironically stumbles across a fortune in gold. Listen to what he says directly to the gold after he discovers it. "O thou sweet king-killer, thou dear divorce twixt natural son and sire, thou, bright defiler of Hymen's purest bed, thou valiant Mars, thou ever young, fresh, loved, and delicate wooer, whose blush doth thaw the consecrated snow that lies on Dian's lap, thou visible God that soldierest close impossibilities and makest them kiss, thou speakest with every tongue to every purpose, O thou touch of hearts! Think thy slave man rebels, and by thy virtue set them into confounding odds, that beasts may have the world in empire." When we return, we'll look at some of the major themes that run through Timon of Athens. In this play, we see some extremes, including philanthropy, which is the improving of humanity through charitable efforts, and misanthropy, which is a hatred of mankind. Timon demonstrates both in this play, but let's take a look at 2 similar themes. At the play's onset, Timon is nothing if not generous. He not only rescues people from jail and provides marriage dowers to his poor servants, he also helps senators, soldiers, and merchants who don't seem to be in any imminent need of rescue. His only reason for helping them is because they're guests at his banquet. But Timon isn't the only generous character in the play. Alcibiades is the only character to whom Timon provides funding, who proactively offers to give him back gold in his time of need. In addition, Flavius is as loyal a servant as there is, and even after Timon is destitute, seeks him out to continue serving him. In this way, Flavius resembles Adam in As You Like It, who agrees to provide his master Orlando with money that he himself has saved in the service of his father, Sir Roland de Boys, so that he can continue to serve Orlando. If we look at ingratitude in this play, there's certainly plenty of it to go around. One need only look at anyone other than the characters already mentioned to see lots of examples of it. The poet, the painter, the jeweler, the senators, Lord Lucius, Lucullus, and Sempronius are all guilty of taking from Timon's bounty and abandoning him after he becomes destitute. The only other person who doesn't demonstrate ingratitude is Apomantus, who would never accept any gifts from Timon. In comparison to the others, Apomantus almost seems friendly to Timon. But with friends like him, who needs enemies? It won't take long to discuss the theme of appreciation in this play because there really isn't very much of it. Flavius is the first person who comes to mind. In fact, he's one of the only characters in the entire play who's consistently respected by all. He goes above and beyond to serve his master, even when he knows that Timon is not in any position to repay him. And while the other servants are also loyal to Timon, they part company after Timon flees Athens to live in a cave. Yet that doesn't stop Flavius from seeking him out and still trying to help him. In addition, Ventidius flies to Timon after he's released from prison because Timon posted his bail and lets him know that his father has died and left him a fortune. He immediately wants to repay Timon double the amount of his bail, but Timon refuses to take his money because it was a gift. Well, at least Ventidius gets an A for effort, and you have to respect him for his attempt to do the right thing. But Alcibiades also demonstrates his respect for Lord Timon, first by offering him gold when he meets him in the wilderness, and second by including justice for Timon's offenders from the Senate as a condition of his willingness not to destroy Athens. When we return, we'll look at some of the most powerful lines from Timon of Athens. I must admit that Timon of Athens, along with Coriolanus, Titus Andronicus, and Troilus and Cressida, is among my least favorite Shakespeare plays. However, in preparing for this episode, I finally found a way to appreciate this play's message. If you take the play's lessons about how unwise it is to give to those who do not care for you and who will stab you in the back as soon as you can no longer benefit them, and apply it more to nations rather than individuals, the play takes on a completely different meaning with greater relevance to the political world in which we live. As a result of being scorned, when he's no longer able to be charitable, Timon undergoes an incredible transformation in the course of the play. For example, in Act 1, Scene 2, we see the generous, sincere, and naive Timon giving a speech at his banquet to his so-called friends on how grateful he is to be able to have friends he can help. This is a far cry from what we're going to hear him say later on in the play. "O you gods, think I, what need we have any friends if we should ne'er have need of 'em? They were the most needless creatures living, should we ne'er have use for 'em, and would most resemble sweet instruments hung up in cases that keep their sounds to themselves. Why, I have often wished myself poorer, that I might come nearer to you. We are born to do benefits, and what better or properer can we call our own than the riches of our friends? Oh, what a precious comfort 'tis to have so many like brothers commanding one another's fortunes. O joy, e'en made away ere it can be born. Mine eyes cannot hold out water, methinks. To forget their faults, I drink to you." Now, let's turn to another character in this play who is also wronged by those he's helped in the past. In Act 3, Scene 6, Alcibiades gives a foreboding soliloquy after being banished. "Now the gods keep you old enough that you may live only in bone, that none may look on you. I am worse than mad. I have kept back their foes while they have told their money and let out their coin upon large interest. I myself rich only in large hurts. All those for this? Is this the balsam that the usuring Senate pours into captains' wounds? Banishment? It comes not ill. I hate not to be banished. It is a cause worthy my spleen and fury that I may strike at Athens. I'll cheer up my discontented troops and lay for hearts. 'Tis honor with most lands to be at odds. Soldiers should brook as little wrongs as gods." This is very similar to Coriolanus' speech after being banished by Rome, in which he declares, "I banish you." In Act 4, Scene 3, we see Timon after his fall from grace. He's living in a cave out in the wilderness, but ironically encounters many guests. One of them is Epaminondas, who doesn't believe in the saying, "Don't kick a man when he's down." Timon, whom at this point has become a misanthrope and hates mankind, asks Epaminondas, "Why shouldst thou hate men? They never flattered thee. What hast thou given? If thou wilt curse, thy father, that poor rag, must be thy subject, who, in spite, put stuff to some she-beggar, and compounded thee, poor rogue hereditary. Hence, begone. If thou hadst not been born the worst of men, thou hadst been a knave and flatterer." In other words, Timon is saying, if you want to curse someone, curse your father for getting some poor woman pregnant and out of spite conceived you. And considering this play takes place 4,500 years BC, this would make this one of the earliest your mama jokes in recorded history. In the same scene, Epaminondas responds to Timon with an objective but accurate observation. "The middle of humanity thou never knewst, but the extremity of both ends. When thou wast in thy guilt and thy perfume, they mocked thee for too much curiosity. In thy rags thou knowest none, but art despised for thy contrary." While what Epaminondas is saying is true, it lacks any hint of compassion or sympathy for someone who's drastically fallen from grace due to his selfless generosity, making him a cynic who lacks any admirable qualities. And finally, in Act 5, Scene 1, the poet and the painter hear that Timon has more gold, so they seek him out in the woods. But they don't even bother to bring anything to sell him. Listen to what they say. The poet starts, "What have you now to present unto him?" The painter says, "Nothing at this time but my visitation. Only I will promise him an excellent piece." The poet says, "I must serve him so too. Tell him of an intent that's coming toward him." The painter says, "Good is the best. Promising is the very air of the time. It opens the eyes of expectation. Performance is ever the duller for his act, but in the plainer and simpler kind of people, the deed of saying is quite out of use. To promise is most courtly and fashionable. Performance is a kind of will or testament, which argues a great sickness in his judgment that makes it." It sounds like these two actually believe their own hype. They're saying that making promises has become the fashion, but making good on your promises shows poor judgment. As the old African proverb goes, beware the naked man who offers you his shirt. When we return, we'll look at some major turning points in Timon of Athens, as well as correlations to some of the other Shakespeare plays. I'd like to look at 3 key turning points in the play. The first is in Act 2, Scene 2, when Timon first discovers that he's out of money. Naturally, he enters the first stage of grief, which is denial. After his steward Flavius assures him that he is destitute, he's outraged and accuses Flavius of both helping himself to his master's money or not informing him sooner about the problem. The fact is, neither of those accusations is true. Flavius is as honest as the day is long and tried numerous times to call the problem to Timon's attention. In any case, Timon could have handled the situation better. First, he should have gone in person and directly requested help from the people whom he benefited. It would have been much harder for them to look him in the eye and still turn him down completely in his hour of need. He also could have gone back into the Athenian army, as he was a notable swordsman who performed well in the past. Or he could have just joined Alcibiades' military campaign against Athens, which he also detested. There's no question that together the two of them would have been able to share the spoils of that vanquished city. The second major turning point is in Act 4, Scene 3, when Timon finds gold while digging for roots in a cave. He could have started over somewhere else and had a fresh start, or he could have used his fortune to pay off his debts and return to his home in Athens. And finally, in Act 5, Scene 5, the final scene of the entire play, we see Alcibiades agreeing to show mercy to the trembling senators who come to beg him not to destroy the entire city. He agrees to only punish those who have wronged either him or Lord Timon, and it's very fortunate for the senators and the rest of the city that he didn't ransack the entire nation. In this way, Alcibiades greatly resembles Coriolanus, who agreed to show mercy to Rome even though it cost him his own life. Now, let's take a look at some of the many correlations in Timon of Athens to some of the other Shakespeare plays. At the first banquet, a bunch of ladies dressed like Amazons perform a dance as entertainment for the guests. In The Two Noble Kinsmen, Gerald the schoolmaster leads a troupe of country gentlemen and wenches in a morris dance as entertainment for the newly married Duke Theseus and Hippolyta. In Pericles, Prince of Tyre, the contestants dance with ladies at a feast in Pentapolis. In Much Ado About Nothing, the guests dance at a masque in Messina. In Henry VIII, the king and his nobles dance at a masque at a banquet thrown by Cardinal Wolsey. Romeo and Juliet meet and dance at a masque at a banquet thrown by Lord Capulet. And in Love's Labour's Lost, the King of Navarre and his friends dance with the Queen of France and her ladies at a masque while pretending to be visiting Muscovites. Timon throws a second banquet in order to have revenge on his false friends. In Titus Andronicus, Titus also throws a banquet at the end of the play to get revenge on his enemies. Flavius tries to warn Timon of a matter that's near to him, but Timon rebuffs him and thus misses a chance for him to avoid going to rack and ruin. In Julius Caesar ignores Artemidorus' attempt to read his petition because he says what's nearest to Caesar shall be read last, and thus misses a chance to uncover the assassination plot on his life and thus avoid being stabbed to death in the Capitol. Flavius tries to give his lord sound advice even though his master completely and wrongfully ignores him. In The Winter's Tale, Camillo tries to give his master Leontes good advice even though he completely and wrongfully ignores him. In King Lear, Kent tries to give his king good advice even though he completely and wrongfully ignores him. And at the end of Richard III, Catesby tries to help Richard to a horse and Richard completely and wrongfully ignores him. What's the point of surrounding yourself with trusted advisors if you're just going to ignore their advice in the first place? Alcibiades pleads for his junior officer's life, who is a prisoner facing death. In Richard III, Lord Stanley pleads for the life of his servant, who is also facing death. In The Two Noble Kinsmen, Amelia and Hippolyta both plead for the lives of Archite and Palamon, who are facing death. In The Merchant of Venice, Portia pleads for mercy for the life of Antonio, who is facing death. In Measure for Measure, Mariana and Isabel plead for mercy for the wicked Lord Angelo, who is also facing death. And in Richard II, the Duchess of York pleads for mercy for her son O'Merle, who is also facing death. Alcibiades is loved by the Senate in war because he protects them and keeps them safe, but they ignore him in his time of need. In Henry VI, Part 1, John Talbot is loved by everyone in time of war, but is ignored by Somerset and York in his time of need. And in Coriolanus is loved by the consul in time of war, but extremely resented in time of peace by two consul members. Alcibiades is wrongfully banished by the Senate for standing up for a brave soldier and returns home to vanquish Athens. In Coriolanus is wrongfully banished by the consul and returns home to vanquish Rome. In Titus Andronicus, Lucius is wrongfully banished by the judges and returns home to vanquish Rome. And in Richard II, Henry Bolingbroke is wrongfully banished by King Richard and returns home to reclaim his father's lands. The Senate is smug when they banish Alcibiades, but they tremble when he comes back to destroy Athens. In Coriolanus, the consul is smug when they banish Coriolanus, but they tremble when he comes back to destroy Rome. Timon goes mad after he's ill-used by those to whom he'd been very generous and lives in a hovel in the wilderness. his loyal servant Flavius seeks him out to comfort him and save him. In King Lear, Lear also goes mad after being misused by his flattering daughters, who turn against him and demonstrate self-righteous justification for dismissing him in his time of need, and he hides out in a shelter on a heath. His foolish clown remains loyal to him and tries to comfort and save him. Kent also returns and tries to help his former master. Apomantus serves as the play's cynic on human nature and doesn't like any of the other characters in the play. In Troilus and Cressida, Thersites serves as the play's cynic on human nature and also doesn't like any of the other characters. But I have to say that even though Thersites is disgusting, at least he's entertaining. Apomantus just comes across as an arrogant and obnoxious jerk. Timon is content to live in the wilderness, and As You Like It, Dune Sr. is content to live in the wilderness. In The Two Noble Kinsmen, Archite and Palamon are content to live together in prison, and in The Two Gentlemen of Verona, Valentine finds contentment living in the forest. In Act 4, Scene 3, Titus almost talks a couple of bandits out of thieving, similar to Marina, who successfully converts Mytilene brothel-goers to lead virtuous lives in Pericles, Prince of Tyre. Alcibiades is the political and military ruler who's left to close out the play, just like Octavius Caesar in Antony and Cleopatra, Tullus Aufidius in Coriolanus, Fortinbras in Hamlet, Richmond in Richard III, Malcolm in Macbeth, Edgar in King Lear, and Prince Henry in The Life and Death of King John. And lastly, the play's final message is sad, unpleasant, and deeply depressing, like that of Titus Andronicus, Troilus and Cressida, and Coriolanus. Unfortunately, unlike some of Shakespeare's better tragedies like Hamlet, King Lear, Othello, and Romeo and Juliet, there aren't the same great thought-provoking lessons to take away from this play, except that a fool and his money are soon parted, and to live within your means. But then you already knew that, didn't you? In addition, there's also several biblical correlations in Timon of Athens. First, there are the allusions to the Good Samaritan who stumbles across a man who's been beaten and left on the side of the road by thieves. The Good Samaritan binds his wounds and lends him aid. We see both Alcibiades and Flavius trying to come to Timon's rescue and give him aid, even though he refuses their help. Next, we have the Sermon on the Mount, which talks about not casting pearls before swine, which Timon did by throwing away his wealth on people who didn't need it or didn't appreciate it. There also appears to be a reference to Jesus telling Peter that he will deny him 3 times before the cock crows. We see that Timon is told by his servants that he's been denied by 3 of his benefactors. There's also a reference to the prodigal son, who squanders everything he has, but is welcomed back with open arms by his father. Unfortunately, even though the Senate welcomes back Timon at the end of the play to fight against Alcibiades, he turns them down, but instead says he'll show them pity by allowing any of the citizens to hang themselves on his tree and thus avoid Alcibiades' wrath. And finally, Timon finally admits at the end of the play that in Flavius he has found one honest man. That is reminiscent of the story of God telling Abraham he will destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, and Abraham negotiating with God to spare the city if he could find but 10 honest men. Unfortunately, like Timon, God only found one, and that was Abraham's nephew Lot, thus proving the old saying that if a good man is hard to find, locating an honest man is even harder. When we return, we'll look at some interesting facts about Timon of Athens. In preparing to do this episode, I did some research, and this is what I found. Timon of Athens was most likely William Shakespeare's 29th play and was written around 1606. The story of Timon, however, which takes place around 400 BC, was very well known in Shakespeare's time. The principal source of this work was the life of Marcus Antonius by Plutarch, which dates back to about the 1st or 2nd century AD. It's also believed that Shakespeare co-wrote the play with Thomas Middleton, who was one of his most successful contemporaries. The play is considered a tragedy and is bitter in its tone like Coriolanus, The Tempest, and King Lear. And except for some ladies who dress up as Amazons to dance at the first banquet, the only other named women characters in the entire play are two prostitutes, Phrynia and Timandra, who travel along with Alcibiades' invading army and only appear in one scene. It's unique in that it appears to be incomplete and not nearly as polished as some of Shakespeare's other plays. For example, there were originally no acts separating the action and the surviving script. These were added later by secondary sources. Also, there seems to be a great bit of confusion about the value of talents mentioned throughout the play, in which 5 talents appears to be a great deal of money at one point, and 500 talents is considered not very much. The play's themes include human greed, ingratitude, hypocrisy, and the possible negative ramifications of extreme generosity. Overall, it deals with the topics of philanthropy and misanthropy, or in other words, the use and misuse of patronage. And while many people consider Timon of Athens to be among Shakespeare's weaker tragedies, Herman Melville considered Timon to be among the most profound of Shakespeare's plays. In fact, in his 1852 novel Pierre, Melville used the term Timonism about an artist's contemptuous rejection of both his audience and mankind in general. And in Robert Greene's 1590 Greene's Mourning Garment, he used the term Timonist to refer to a lonely misanthrope. It is believed that this play may not have ever been performed in Shakespeare's lifetime. In fact, the earliest known performance of the straight Shakespearean text was not until 1861, when it was performed in Dublin. And to date, it has only appeared once on Broadway at the Lyceum Theatre in 1993. Ralph Waldo Emerson alluded to Timon in his 1844 essay entitled Gifts. Emerson writes, "This giving is flat usurpation, and therefore, when the beneficiary is ungrateful, as all beneficiaries hate all Timons, I rather sympathize with the beneficiary than with the anger of my Lord Timon." In 1963, Duke Ellington was commissioned to compose original music for the Stratford Shakespeare Festival's first production of Timon of Athens. And finally, in 1991, Stephen Oliver composed a 2-act opera, Timon of Athens, which was first performed at the London Coliseum. When we return, we'll look at some of the remarkable actors in the 1981 BBC Shakespeare version of Timon of Athens. All right, now let's take a look at some of the remarkable actors in the 1981 BBC Shakespeare version of Timon of Athens. Jonathan Pryce, who plays Timon, played Juan Perón in Evita in 1996, and Cardinal Wolsey in the television series Wolf Hall. John Bird, who plays the painter, played the pedant in The Taming of the Shrew in 1980, and the Duke of Albany in King Lear in 1982. David Kinsey, who plays the jeweler, played the haberdasher in The Taming of the Shrew in 1980. John Welsh, who plays Flavius, played Archidamus in The Winter's Tale, also in 1981. Max Arthur, who plays Lucilius, played the second gentleman in All's Well That Ends Well, also in 1981. Norman Rodway, who plays Apomantus, played the Earl of Gloucester in King Lear in 1982, and Cleon of Tarsus in Pericles, Prince of Tyre in 1984. Geoffrey Collins, who plays Flaminius, played Dolabella in Antony and Cleopatra, also in 1981. Terence McGinty, who plays Servilius, played the first gentleman in All's Well That Ends Well, the second gentleman in Othello, both in 1981, and the British captain in Cymbeline in 1982. Hugh Thomas, who plays Lucius, played Cornelius in Cymbeline in 1982. John Bailey, who plays Sopronius, played Griffin in Henry VIII in 1979. Michael Anthony, who plays Caiaphas, played the messenger in Antony and Cleopatra, also in 1981. Bev Willis, who plays Vera's servant, played Batista's servant in The Taming of the Shrew in 1980. David Neal, who plays the first senator, played Proculus in Antony and Cleopatra, also in 1981. Cornelius Garrett, who plays the prisoner, played Megarelon in Troilus and Cressida, and a servant to Leontes in The Winter's Tale, all in 1981. Elaine Sharling, who plays Phrynia, played Cassandra in Troilus and Cressida, also in 1981, and the goddess Diana in Pericles, Prince of Tyre, in 1984. David Kincaid, who plays the first bandit, played Grumio in The Taming of the Shrew in 1980. Derek Dedman, who plays the second bandit, played Nicholas in The Taming of the Shrew in 1980. And Gil Morris, who plays a soldier, played Philip in The Taming of the Shrew in 1980. And finally, John Shrapnel, who played Alcibiades, also played Hector in Troilus and Cressida, also in 1981. Kent in King Lear in 1982. Duncan in Kenneth Branagh's version of Macbeth in 2013. And Camillo in Kenneth Branagh's version of The Winter's Tale in 2015. Now stay tuned for today's trivia challenge, which is called Crying Uncle. All right, and now it's time for today's trivia challenge, which is called Crying Uncle. Identify the characters whose uncle this is and in which play they appear. Number 1, Leonato. Number 2, Duke Senior. And number 3, Pandarus. When we return, I'll have the answers for you, and we'll finish up with some relevant lessons from Timon of Athens. Okay, now let's see how you did on today's trivia challenge called Crying Uncle. You were to identify the characters whose uncle this is and in which play they appear. Number 1, Leonato. That would be Beatrice in Much Ado About Nothing. Number 2, Duke Senior. That would be Celia in As You Like It. And number 3, Pandarus. That would be Cressida in Troilus and Cressida. Now, let's finish up with some relevant lessons from Timon of Athens. First, as Polonius advises his son Laertes in Hamlet, neither a borrower nor a lender be. It's always best to give a gift generously without expecting anything in return for it. Without fail, people who are in need and get a helping hand in the form of a loan always seem to find reasons to resent the giver and make their own problems the fault of their benefactor. Second, remember that people aren't perfect. Don't look to hate other people because of their faults. Remember that everyone has them, especially us. Instead, be grateful for your friends who look past your faults and love you anyway. And finally, remember that life gets infinitely easier when you learn to expect less of others, criticize slower, and forgive faster. I'm Dave Romeo, and thank you for watching this episode of Romeo on Shakespeare. Please join me next time when a pair of happy women outsmart one of Shakespeare's most popular knaves and punish him soundly for the lechery he craves.